Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Dan Santarelli, a digital media producer at Police One, and I'll be kicking off today's webinar titled Cultivating an Engaged Team, Strategies and Techniques to Support Positive Morale in Law Enforcement. Thank you to our sponsor today, Utility, for putting together today's panelists to bring this presentation. I have just a few housekeeping notes before we get into the presentation. First, you're joining this webinar in listen-only mode, which means you will be muted. However, we encourage you to join the conversation and interact with the panelists by typing your questions and comments into the attendee question box at any time during the discussion. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. We'll also be making this webinar recording available on demand on policeone.com, so you can refer back to this event at any time and send it to your colleagues. Also, while we do not anticipate having any technical issues, they do sometimes occur. If this happens, we do have a backup plan, so please stand by while we resolve the issue, and we appreciate your patience. With that out of the way, let me introduce our moderator for today, Charles Edwards.
Dan, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to today's discussion, Cultivating an Engaged Team, Strategies and Techniques to Support Positive Morale in Law Enforcement. My name is Charles Edwards, and I'm representing the facilitation team at Jackson Spalding. Jackson Spalding is a full-service communications agency, and we've been partnering with Utility, and we are proud to continue to do so, especially for today's discussion. I'm here today moderating our discussion on behalf of Utility, the innovative technology company that continually delivers groundbreaking digital systems for frontline professions that depend on speed, accuracy, easy to access data, and transparency in their work. Now, for today's discussion, I'm joined by two law enforcement leaders and a member of the Utility team. They've all come together to share their unique perspectives on how agencies can build morale to positively impact retention and job satisfaction, as well as how they're implementing these insights with their teams. Now, one of the things that we do want to talk about is the Police One 2021 What Cops Want State of the Industry survey. That survey did reveal that 77% of officers polled felt that morale had decreased in their agency in the past year. Moreover, they resoundingly shared what they want from their leaders, which is to communicate and to be consistent and to care. So let's begin. We're going to do quick introductions of our panelists. We have two panelists joining us via video and one panelist joining us via audio. So Chief Thedrick Andres is joining us via audio. Chief, if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself, that would be great.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Thedrick Andres. I am the Chief of Police here in Henderson, Nevada. If you are aware of Henderson, I'll give you a little bit about our geography. We're just to the east of Las Vegas metropolitan area, and we're about the second largest city here in the state of Nevada. I've been here for 4 years and the chief of the Henderson Police Department for the last 3 years. A little bit about my background. I've been in law enforcement now 32 years, started my career off with the New Orleans Police Department, and then worked at the Arlington, Texas Police Department before having the great opportunity to be Chief of Police here in Southern Nevada. So thank you for having me today.
Chief, thank you very much for your time and being here with us. Next, with introductions, we have Captain Brendan Laflamme. Captain Laflamme, if you would give us an introduction, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brendan Laflamme. I'm a captain with the Hollis, New Hampshire Police Department. Hollis is in the southern portion of the state. We border Massachusetts. We're a smaller community. Population is about 8,000 people, or residents. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, 18 of which have been here. In Hollis, I have held pretty much every position with the exception of the chief position in this agency. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here.
Captain Laflamme, thank you very much. And last but not least, Brian Churchill, would love to hear a little bit about you as we begin.
Good afternoon. I was an Indianapolis Police Department officer for 26 years, retired from there as a lieutenant. My last position was as the executive officer for Downtown District. I became the chief of police out in a little town in Colorado named Manitou Springs, and I am now a business manager for utility.
Brian, thank you very much for that. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. And we want to go ahead and get started with this group of professionals we've assembled today. We're going to discuss how they're actively addressing this feedback to balance these three areas of focus with insight into some specific areas. The barriers to positive morale, programs and planning efforts to build strong relationships within agencies, implementing technology solutions to support recruitment and retention, implementing technology solutions to streamline workload, developing key performance indicators, and communication solutions to support engagement. Now, one of the things that we do want to ask is we want to, throughout our conversation, bring up an opportunity for you all, the audience, to tell us what is on your mind. So we're going to be throwing some various poll questions out there, and you can use the function in GoToWebinar to answer the question. We'll read your responses real time because it'll give us a sense of everything that is on your mind as it relates to this conversation. And so the first question that we wanted to ask as we open up our poll here, which one of the following barriers is most challenging for your agency? As you see, we have 4 options on the screen right here. The first is career satisfaction or officer morale. The second is recruitment and retention. The third is measuring performance. And the fourth, effective use of technology. Of those 4, which one of these barriers is the most challenging for your agency? Go ahead and select one in the poll, and we'll read those results real time. Again, we're looking for members of our audience to answer the question in the poll right now. Which one of these barriers is most challenging for your agency? We're asking you to select one of the 4 options, either career satisfaction, officer morale, or recruitment retention, or measuring performance, and the last option, effective use of technology. Go ahead and select one in the poll, and we'll take a look at the results as they come in. So right here, we're able to see that most of you, 55%, say recruitment and retention is the biggest barrier. That is the biggest challenge for your agency. Coming right behind recruitment and retention, it's career satisfaction and officer morale with 39%. And then 6% of you answering the poll said measuring performance. So we definitely want to talk about all of those, but we will highlight recruitment and retention because it was a big one that came out in our first poll question here. So, Chief Andres, I want to go to you first. When you see those results and recruitment retention is the top one that you see, I'd love to just get your reaction to that, to the results of that poll question. What stands out to you when you see that the attendees of our webinar here are really dealing with recruitment and retention as their biggest challenge?
Well, I appreciate that. I think that, Charles, that's not surprising to me. Recently here at the Henderson Police Department, we started an employee-driven strategic plan, and we came up with 5 goals. One of those goals was centered around employees. And our employees were concerned, right, about hiring, developing, and retaining an outstanding and diverse workforce. But I would say that is a challenge for all law enforcement agencies today when you think about recruitment and retention. Many of our agencies are now dealing with the retirement bubble that it's hitting as a result of police reform and other challenges that continue to exist around law enforcement. That has absolutely been an Achilles heel to us bringing in additional officers. So it's going to be very important at police departments that not only we work on finding different ways and incentives to keep and retain the talent that we have, but more importantly, recruiting and attracting officers to law enforcement. And I think that is going to really be centered around our culture, working and branding ourselves, if you will, with the public, to talk about the things that not only we do in community policing, but the importance of establishing procedural justice throughout law enforcement agencies.
So Chief, let me follow up here. We saw what our attendees say is the most pressing challenge to them. Let me pose the question to you directly. In your mind, what is the most pressing barrier to positive morale within law enforcement? Is it recruitment or retention, or is there another factor that you think is the most pressing?
You know, I think when you, Charles, talk about barriers to morale, I think communication stands out to me the most. You know, we talk about a few things here at our department that's important to us as Henderson, and that's the disconnection cycle. It's that failure, right, to ensure that from administration all the way down to our line level officers, but our line levels officers back to the chief's office, right, understand the why behind decisions that are made in law enforcement. Throughout our strategic planning process, that was something that was very important that our employees identified. You know, they wanted communication, more communication, but effective communication so that they understood the why. It's important for us that when we think about that communication vacuum and, you know, really some of the gossip or rumors that happen inside of your briefing rooms and throughout the organization, that our first line supervisors are not reluctant to address these things and dispel those, because employees who don't feel like they that they can weigh in, they're not going to have buy-in into the organization. So employees have to feel like they can weigh in, that their opinions matter, for them to be able to want to stay at an organization that they believe values them as well as their opinions.
Captain Laflamme, we just heard Chief Andrews talk about the importance of communication. People want more communication, they want effective communication. Our attendees are saying recruitment, retention is the most pressing challenge for them. What's your perspective on what we've heard so far from what Chief Andrews said, but also from what the attendees of our webinar have to say?
Well, I think both of those answers are key. The recruitment and retention is a challenge no matter what size agency you're talking about. We went through a brutal period of time where we just couldn't retain people. And the hiring pool is getting smaller every day. You know, for whatever reason, people are just not applying the way they used to. So to combat that, we have really changed the way we do business all the way around. We essentially have an open enrollment where we take applications anytime, and we're giving tests probably half a dozen times a year instead of once a year, which we used to do. Basically, anytime someone shows interest, we grab them and we facilitate a test, even if it's for only one person. And we've been very successful in that. We've changed our methods in other ways too, as far as we actually invite people in as soon as we hear someone's interested. We get them in here immediately, give them tours, give them basically an informal interview before we even start the hiring process, to let people know what our agency is all about and to make sure they even want to follow through with applying. It's not as easy as it used to be as far as just having a standardized test. People come in, yep, I want this job, and it's competitive. We're actively soliciting people at this point. And we've had great success with that. It's been exhausting, but we're finally fully staffed for the first time in I don't know how many years. Communication is huge. From our perspectives, our people want to know that they have a voice in which way this agency is going. And one thing we do, we put out a yearly anonymous survey asking the tough questions. What can we do better? What are we doing well? What are your concerns with the agency? And that starts conversations. They're completely anonymous, so people feel empowered to say whatever they want to say with no fear of retribution or retaliation. And they do feel heard. We, at this point, you know, through these kind of efforts, people feel comfortable coming into the administrative offices and having the conversations. And we need to make sure we validate whatever people are saying and let them know that they're heard. We find that our people are better producers. We get better results when they feel like they have a say in what's going on here. If they bring reasonable ideas to us, we'll let them run with their ideas on problem solving or policy issues or whatever it may be. And really, the frontline people run the bulk of what we do around here at this point, because they feel empowered to be involved.
Captain Laflamme, you talked about the anonymous surveys, you talked about listening. So when you think about what your officers are asking for the most, if you could summarize, after doing all that listening, what your officers are asking for the most, what comes to mind?
Usually quality of life issues for them, scheduling concerns, staffing levels, being able to flex their schedules a little bit, which, I mean, we do allow some of that kind of stuff, and it pays off. People come in and say, hey, I have issues with day shift because I have a child care issue every Wednesday. We'll let them flex their hours and figure a way to cover the hour or 2 hours that they need to leave early. That's a quality of life issue. It goes a long way. They appreciate the efforts that we make to accommodate them, and that helps with the retention, because it's a culture that a lot of places don't have. And listening to them and accommodating those kind of things, huge pay.
Brian, I want to bring you in the conversation here. One of the words that Captain Laflamme just mentioned is culture. And I wanted to ask you, from your experience, how important is agency culture to morale, to retention, and to job satisfaction?
One of my favorite quotes that I read a long time ago, and I thought it was very important, I've used it to this day, is a quote by General George Patton back in the 1940s. He said, the most important thing in any organization is a soul that is based on pride, right? Pride in that organization, pride in that patch you wear, pride in that badge you wear, right? I was 4th generation Indianapolis police officer. I put the badge on that my dad had worn. To me, I was joining something that was greater than myself, and I did not want to tarnish that badge, did not want to tarnish that patch. And I tell you now, in my job with utility, I travel over 9 states. I'm in an agency right now. Every day I'm somewhere new in a different building, and I can tell you this, that there are agencies I walk into that you immediately feel that pride, that soul, that esprit de corps, right? It's a fast-paced, happy environment. You feel the motivation in the agency. And it's not the building that makes that. It's not the patrol car, right? It is the feeling of family, of team spirit. I think the chief and the captain both hit it dead on the head, right? And especially the new generations, right? It's more about me. It's more about, well, do they care about me? Does the chief care about me? Do I have a say in what's going on? I can go, you go back a few generations, it was more about a job and getting the pension. That was what was important. Today, what has become important, is, especially for millennials, is am I valued? Does the chief care about me? Does the agency put effort into me as an individual, right? Are we flexible? What are my opportunities for the future? And I think that the agencies that I've walked into around my area of responsibility, where the department is following the guidance that I've just heard from the captain and the chief, you feel that when you walk into the building. Those people believe the agency cares about them. And I've seen that the complaints from those commanders, those sheriffs, those chiefs of police, their retention problems aren't the same as an agency that is low morale. People don't feel cared about, and they don't feel like their input has been taken to heart.
Chief Andrews, Brian just talked about the difference between high morale and low morale. You can walk into a building and feel it if it's there. I know in your department, you all have taken a look at the issue of morale and have tried to put some things into place. Can you walk us through what the challenge was that you were facing, how you came up with that solution, and how you put it into place? I imagine people in the audience watching this webinar today, they're dealing with some of these same issues. They're looking for solutions. What was the solution that you implemented in your department?
Thanks, Charles. You know, one of the things that we did here at the Henderson Police Department, you know, I've been here now for going on 5 years, and we continue to hear challenges about morale. And sometimes when you talked about things and morale in the organization, it really depended on what administration that the employees may have been talking about. Whether it was my administration or 3 or 4 administrations ago, the one thing that I believe employees centered around with morale was the fact that they don't feel that they were heard or not given a venue to be heard. So we created, along with our third-party partners, I will have to give credit to them, the Institute of Executive Development, we started to having discussions around our strategic plan. And we said, let's do an employee-driven strategic plan. Now, I got pretty nervous about that, to be honest with you. It's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure the employees will probably point most of the blame to me. But if we're going to give them a voice in the process, let's hear what they have to say. And so one of the things we did was we created operational development meetings. And we began to meet with our supervisors, empowering them to look at areas of the department and provide some performance matrix and strategies for improvement. We held operations meeting with both our sworn and professional staff employees. We began to look at with them with like half-day sessions. We wanted to interact with them to figure out, hey, what are your recommendations from a line staff that you think should be included in this plan? We talked about those key performance areas, right? Our indicators and recommendations that as we identify those KPIs, what targets and recommendations should we have with being able to accomplish them? And I'll tell you, we came away with 5 goals. And those 5 goals were crime reduction. Our employees, because we have one of the better police departments in this country, understand the importance of reducing crime. But they wanted to make sure that we understood to do that, we needed to be innovative and look at technology. We talked about employees. That was another goal. Hiring, developing, retaining the more diverse workforce. Community engagement, strengthening our partnerships with the community. We do an excellent job in that, but we wanted to improve on that. And then our culture, right? Our culture came into play. We wanted to make sure that we were building and maintaining a strong culture here at Henderson so that those that come behind us understand that. And the last one was organizational capability. How do we continuously improve the Henderson Police Department? All of those goals were selected by our employees. What we have now done was to look at our key performance areas. Our plan is still very new, and now what we're doing is hitting low-hanging fruit. One of the things that came out of that was we wanted to develop and have and put in place recruiting more experienced officers to offset the experience that was leaving the organization. So we created a lateral recruitment program. I'm proud to say we graduated a class of 11 officers from around the country who have joined this amazing police department. So we've taken that approach. I'll kind of stop there to look and hear what our officers had to say, and then to be actionable as we start taking some of those suggestions and KPIs and delivering on those.
One quick follow-up here, Chief Andrews. You mentioned KPIs. You've got your plan, that 5-step plan focused on employees that you talked about. But when it comes to measuring the plan, is this working the way it's intended? Are you either meeting or exceeding standards? How do you come up with those KPIs? How do you measure it?
Great point. So what we did was when we came up with the KPIs, one of the things we wanted to do first was when we came up with those key performance indicators, we went back to the organization and said, okay, this is what we have. Did we hear you? Did we get it right? Right? And our employees was like, yeah, that's exactly what we stated in those task force meetings. Then this is for them, the key was, okay, are you going to accomplish those? So with the KPIs, what we do now is at least once a month, we're meeting as a senior management team. We're looking at all of those key performance indicators, and the senior management team is required to report out on what KPIs did they accomplish. We also talk about what blocking factors that may be there. And so that I, as a chief, understand that if those are things in my area, whether there's financial or whether there's technological things that I can help along with the plan, that I'm also responsible to assist all of those members in moving that key performance area, hopefully to the finish line. And so we look at that, and as we get those performance matrix, we report out on our SharePoint, here's what we've done. Here's the progress that we're making with our strategic planning process, so everyone in the organization can see that we all have skin in the game.
Chief, thank you. Captain, I want to go to you. You just heard the chief talk about, we've got this plan. We focused on employees, 5-step plan. Here's how we measure it. When it comes to morale for your department, how do you evaluate morale in your department?
Right, thank you. So the strategic plan, Chief, that sounds amazing. Having your employees basically run that, that's awesome. We measure it really by talking to our people as far as morale. It's very easy. Now, granted, we're a smaller agency, we're only 18 sworn officers, but we can actually go and grab an officer at any time of the day and have a conversation. And because of the work we've put in here, we feel that they're honest conversations. And you know, like I said earlier, officers come up to administrative offices all the time, come in, have a seat, and engage in conversations. The key is making sure they understand that we're actually listening, and that we're going to help them with whatever the issue is, or be active in solving the problem. We're a little unique because of the size of our agency. You know, I know that's not possible in the bigger agencies, but for here, it is a reality.
And to follow up on that, do you see positive agency morale contributing to positive community engagement? So we're talking a lot about the departments internally. How does that internal work translate into the work you're doing in the community?
It's absolutely goes hand in hand. I wasn't always as fortunate to have the group of people I have right now. And when morale was down, we saw less community engagement. Officers were not just happy to go out and greet the public and engage in all the community policing initiatives. And now it's like part of every day, and we don't even think about it. Our officers are happy. They go out, they greet the public. They're happy to be out there, and the public recognizes it. Speaking of performance indicators, I can't tell you how many times we get phone calls or emails from members of the public saying, hey, this officer did this, or stop by here and talk to my kid, or you know, whatever it is. We get it all the time, where members of the public are saying, hey, that's great what your officers are doing. Thank you so much. And, you know, that's certainly an indicator that we're doing something right here.
So Brian, yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to kind of follow up real quick, because I think that Brandon brought up a good thing when we talk about agency morale, right? One of the things that we do also in every one of our meetings is we start our meetings out to talk about how our employees are living our values, right? When we look at our values of honor, professionalism, and dedication, HPD, and we talk about our vision to be one of the premier police agencies in America, one of the things that we try to continue to talk about is give examples of how our employees are doing that. Because it's important that not only do we validate that work, but we're communicating that back out in the field. And we ensure that also in our briefings that when the sergeants and lieutenants are meeting, that we talk about how we're living those values. Because if our mission is excellence in safety and service, then we want to make sure our employees are seeing these things, that we're talking about how we're exhibiting these things, that we are walking the walk, talking the talk, but we also are doing that in the community when we're meeting with them, because I think that's how you increase esprit de corps, and I think that's how you increase agencies of not only respect for that strategic plan, but for who we are as an organization.
Chief, thank you for that. Brian, when you hear the chief and you hear the captain talk about, setting plans, measuring those plans, making sure that you're using either the surveys or having just a one-on-one conversations, there's a lot of, kind of that old school, traditional, tried and true approach that still works. I do want to ask you though, does technology play a role in any of this? How can technology support positive morale within a department, within an agency?
I think that's a conversation for a webinar of its own. But one thing I do believe is today's policing is a lot more difficult when it comes to duties and responsibilities and technology being piled on officers, right? Back in the day, you go to work, you got your gun, your nightstick, and your flashlight with you, and that's what you had to worry about. You went out and ran your beat. With today, with technology and with social media and all the other responsibilities and public sentiment, all of that weight sits on an officer's shoulders when they go out there at work at night. And I think the light in this room just timed out on me. I'll have to get up here in a minute, but I think that if you can provide your officers with technology that makes their job easier, that takes some of the weight of that responsibility off their shoulders, that technology can work for them and not against them, to make their job safer, make their job more efficient, and make them more accountable to the public, then it's a win-win all the time. If we're adding things onto officers' list of responsibilities, list of technology that just is a burden that makes their job harder, then obviously that's going to lower morale, it's going to lower quality of work, it's going to lower output.
Well, we're on this topic of technology. We'll pause our conversation here to ask our audience about technology. We rolled out one poll question at the beginning of our conversation. Let's now go back to our audience with another poll question, and it does relate to technology. So the question that we're asking you right now is this: which technology would be most beneficial to alleviate barriers within your agency? And so we're asking you to select one of the four options: either policy-driven body-worn camera programs, digital evidence management system, or a digital video integration system, or an interview room digital evidence system. Again, go ahead and take the poll, answer one of the options of the question, and that question is, again, which technology would be most beneficial to alleviate barriers within your agency? And again, going over the options here: policy-driven body-worn camera programs, digital evidence management system, digital video integration system, or interview room digital evidence system. Go ahead and select one of the options as you think about your agency as you're listening to this conversation today, and we'll read your results real time. As you're taking the poll, we also, at some point during our conversation, we're going to open up the questions to you in the audience. So also think about the questions you want to ask to our panel of experts. Feel free to enter that question into the chat. We'll take a look at that question and we'll share those questions with our panelists so they can provide answers at that appropriate time. So right now, let's take a look at the results here. It seems like policy-driven body-worn camera programs would be the most beneficial technology to alleviate barriers within your agency. Coming second behind that would be a digital video integration system, and then in third place, a digital evidence management system, and with 5% of people in the room voting interview room digital evidence system. Brian, I want to bring you back into the conversation here. When you see those survey results and people are saying, with the majority of the audience members voting here, some sort of body-worn camera program is going to make their life easier based on how they answer that question, what's your response in seeing that result?
So is technology working for me or against me as a street cop, right? If there's a lot of policy nationwide now that officers have to activate that body-worn camera on any run or on a critical incident type run. There's state law now, especially where I'm from, Colorado, you must record every officer-initiated activity. So is that body-worn camera now working for me or against me? If I have to mentally process turning on a body camera when something fast happens to me on the street, is my technology going to work for me? Is that camera going to be activated for me? Do I know that my camera is going to stay on my uniform and it's going to be turned on, so that at the back end of this critical incident, will the police department, will the chief be able to tell my side of the story? Will the agency know what happened, have the video captured to tell the story of what happened, and then be able through transparency to share that with the public so that the public knows what happened? If I'm not provided with equipment that's working for me and I have to think about turning that camera on, then it's working against me, because officers all across the country now are being beat up in the media for turning their camera on after they're involved in a critical incident, or for not having turned it on at all. And that's because technology, that camera has failed them. And that's because it is designed to that so that an officer has to think, have the time to manually activate that camera. If you have a camera system through technology that turns on for you, whether that's through a holster sensor, through a gyroscope or an accelerometer that knows if I'm running or fighting, it turns on for me, or through switches in the car where if I activate a light bar and open my car door, that camera comes on me, or through CAD activated dispatch, I get a radio run, and simply because I've cleared a radio run that say is a robbery in progress, my camera's on for me. My technology has worked for me. I know that I can go be the police. I know that at the end of that incident, I will have the video evidence that I need, one, to prosecute that case, but two, to tell my side of that story and to share with the public what truly happened. And in knowing that information, my stress level goes down, my belief in the agency will go up, and I believe community trust goes up, which builds morale in your community for your law enforcement agency, thereby also building morale within the agency.
Brian, thank you. Captain, I want to go to you, and then Chief, we'll go to you. Going back to the poll results for that last question, of those four technology options, which one would be the biggest alleviator for, which one would most, really benefit people in the audience? You saw body-worn cameras as number one. What was your reaction in seeing those poll results, Captain?
I think that made sense through my experiences. I would have voted the same way on that. I think the key component there is policy driven. Having policies in place on how that footage is going to be used is very important to the officers that are using the cameras. When we first got cameras here back in 2016, biggest concern was, oh, Big Brother's going to be watching me and that kind of stuff. Well, before we even had the cameras on the shelves, we put a lot of work into policy, found some model policies through IACP and some other places, and really nailed it down to how they're going to be used and how the footage is going to be viewed. And it didn't take long for the officers to come on board and say, okay, this is okay. And now they're very comfortable with it, and they're very comfortable with being recorded too. Officer complaints, people get exonerated a lot now that we have that footage, where before it may have been unfounded or not sustained. Now they're seeing exonerated, which gives a lot of credibility to the program that we have. The officers actually appreciate them.
Thank you for that. Chief Andres, I want to go to you. When you think about some of the best ways that you've been able to keep a pulse on your organization and to engage with officers across an agency, what stands out to you?
Well, Charles, what stands out to me is really making yourselves available, management by walking around. One of the things that I've done since I've been at this agency since 2018 is try to take the time to get out and go on ride-alongs with my officers, spend time in briefing, having an opportunity to get to meet them right in their office, right? That vehicle, those areas where they work every day, our professional staff employees, where they spend their time most. Meeting them in their environment, I think, allows them to have some sense of comfort level, but also to be able to talk to you about the things that they need most in their areas. Because ultimately, my goal as the chief of police is to try to find ways to make their job easier, right? Find ways to get them the tools and technology so that they can continue to do great work. And that's the one thing, if I had to brag about here at the Henderson Police Department, I believe that our officers, as well as professional staff members, we do amazing work each and every day for our community. And I think why that happens is because we hire the right people. When you think about the post of the organization, when I get an opportunity to go out, visit, ride with those officers, be in their role, it also gives me a glimpse into the type of officers that we want to bring to this special agency and to this community to ensure that we not only police in a procedurally just way, but that our community policing efforts and the employees we bring on also meets the expectation for this wonderful community that we serve.
Chief, thank you. Captain, I want to go back to you now. When earlier in our conversation, you talked about one-on-one conversations. You talked about the size of your department being able to do that on a localized level. I'm also curious to know, what are some of the tools and programs that you use to support building strong relationships within your agency, in addition to those one-on-one conversations?
So we do a lot of team building. I don't want to say exercises, but activities, I guess. For example, we just organized a department hike, which it's not mandatory, but we're finding that the more of these types of things we do, the more people actually do them. We get good turnouts, minus the people obviously that are working and can't go. We do it, again, because of our size, we can have a whole department meeting where everybody's in attendance, and we try to do those at least quarterly, but we will usually incorporate some kind of activity at the end of it, usually something as simple as like a luncheon for everybody or a cookout, and it helps build relationships, not just the professional side of it, but we're getting to know our people much better. They get to know us better, and it truly is more family oriented, or we're more like a family. I know that's cliche to say, but it's true. When we take care of our people like this, it turns into that kind of relationship. Another thing we did that we're very proud of, right before the world shut down, we completely overhauled our gym area, got in all new equipment, and changed policy, or created a wellness policy, which addresses mind, body, and spirit. One thing that we did was we created an overlap in, we took advantage of an overlap in shifts so that officers can now work out on duty for the last half hour, 45 minutes of their shift. We're paying them to take care of themselves. And we didn't realize how effective that would be in getting people in there to use the equipment. Now, every shift change, there's at least 2 people in there, where prior to this with policy implementation, it never got used. Now it's incredible. And then COVID hit, they had brand new equipment in there, so even though personal gyms were shut down, they were still able to take care of themselves. And it's paying off dividends. Now at shift change, it's common to see people leaving the station and going for a run, and people are driving by them, beeping and waving at them because they recognize them, and it's a pretty cool thing to see the community noticing that too. And those kind of things seem really small, but they're huge. It shows our employees that we do care and we are listening, and that's what's going to keep people or retain the employees, because they're happy. They're not even thinking about going anywhere else.
Hey,
Captain,
Charles,
thank you.
I have one
Yeah,
thing
Chief, go ahead. Please.
Brandon, just I think that is key. One of the things that we did here in the city of Henderson was we worked with our city manager's office to hire a public safety wellness manager, and bringing in that mental health clinician has been a game changer for us as well. I think the big challenge that we have for us in law enforcement is we get these young men and women into our organizations, right? And it's very important for us to make sure that we have some support systems in place so that when they leave this organization, we can try to hand them back off to their families the way that we brought them in, almost as whole as possible. So having the ability, right, for me to get out and have a post in the organization, but also standing up programs where you have mental health clinicians gives us a chance throughout the day-to-day work that they do, the grind that happens in law enforcement, for them to have an outlet, right? For them to work on their mental health and wellness. We absolutely want them to work out to be healthy, but how do we work out their minds? How do we give them the tools and ability so that they can be resilient throughout their career, because we cannot, right, predict what that next call may be. So I just want to give kudos. I think our mental health clinician that we have is absolutely doing an amazing job in our department, and I think our employees are also having more credibility and more I think opportunities to go and to work through some of the nuances that this profession can have on you.
Chief, Captain, thank you very much for that information. I want to remind our audience, if you have a question, feel free to type your question into the chat. We want to make sure that we're asking the questions that are on your mind and getting answers to your questions from our panel of experts. We do have a question from one of our audience members, and this is in reference to recruiting. I'm going to go ahead and read the question here and then see what our panel of experts have to say about this. This person says, we are a small town police force that is well over an hour's drive from any large metro area. Our police officers come from the surrounding metro areas that put on these leadership academies. In your opinion, how do I get the attention of those recruits to even look in our direction? There's about 35, 40 other agencies closer to those metro areas that all have the same problem, which is a shortage of manpower. Captain Laflamme, let's go to you, and then we'll go to Chief Andres, and then Brian will go to you. But Captain, what do you say to somebody who's running a department? It's not in the metro area. They're trying to compete. What do you say to a question like that?
That's a tough one. I'll tell you what we have done, and we feel we've been very successful with. So we are about an hour away from one of the largest criminal justice college programs in the area. We've actually reached out and partnered with that college to actually go down, and our chief has actually taught kind of as a quasi-adjunct instructor down there to get a foot in the door, which in turn got us access to all of the students there, really. And we started flooding them with our pamphlets and recruiting materials. We also created a recruitment video that can be found on YouTube that we're very proud of. And we have shared that with every college that's willing to talk to us. We've put it up on all of the websites that are available. And we've had great success doing that. It's not an easy task by any means. It takes a lot of work. I will say that any type of career fair that's available, if you have some kind of a decent recruiting video that shows exactly what your agency stands for and who you are, you're going to get the attention of the right people, the right fit for you. Our video has been amazing for that. We've gotten 2 or 3 really good employees, And the first step was them seeing that video and saying, wow, that's kind of the agency I'm looking for in the town I want to be in. Just my 2 cents on that.
Brian, I want to go to you here with the same question. What advice do you have for a law enforcement agency that isn't in a metro area, that might be a little smaller and they're trying to compete?
People want to join a great team, right? If you build pride and esprit de corps in your agency and you show that, you reflect that in your YouTube videos, if you are recruiting at your regional recruit academies, if your state has that, you can present that image, right? People want to join a great reputation, something that's greater than themselves. And I think, and maybe current climate may help with this, quality of life. Life is better in a small town. You can raise your children here. We have good schools. We have a good agency. Everybody knows each other. In a smaller agency, you can talk to the chief on a daily basis. There's times I'd go a year or two in Indianapolis, never saw the chief. So you can sell what millennials and younger people of this day are looking for, right? The opportunity to have input, the opportunity to be personally valued, because you're no longer a number, you're a person. You're somebody that the chief or the commander, when they walk down, they know your name. You can sell that in your recruitment efforts, right? I think people nowadays are looking for that type of feel in a law enforcement agency, and I think it's definitely a good selling point. If I'm a small town, that's the angle I'm working.
Chief Andrews, this next question is directed to you, and it's referencing CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. This person says, with all the employee input in Henderson, what influence, if any, was CALEA in coming up with the KPIs?
That's a great question. We've been a CALEA accredited agency for many years, and when you think about what things that CALEA input in that, I think it's already inputted into our culture, right? Our policies are all CALEA certified. When we look at CALEA and our standards and we put those together and measure those against best practice agencies across the country, I think that plays a lot in your strategic planning process. While we didn't go directly to CALEA, right, to put together any strategic plan we may have had, CALEA has been in the fiber of our organization for years. Our employees understand the importance of it, to be recognized by this accrediting body, and really what it means for us when we're measuring ourselves against what we would call the best of the best.
Chief Andrews, thank you. Let's open up the next question to our entire panel here. So we have another question here that says, you mentioned before that body-worn cameras help to protect officers and ensure transparency with the public. Can you elaborate on this? So Captain, let's go to you here. Can you elaborate a little bit about body-worn cameras helping to protect officers and ensure transparency with the public?
Sure. So I mentioned citizen complaints against officers. Typically here, the most common complaint would be a rudeness complaint. We have very few use of force issues here, but somebody calls and says, hey, this officer was rude to me on the side of the road, said X, Y, and Z. It's so easy to just pull up the body cam footage, look at it, and then have a conversation with the person that's trying to make this complaint. We are also CALEA accredited, so we have to follow our policy on this. So it's a more formal thing. However, when these complaints are made and we find out that either the person is just flat out right lying or maybe just misunderstood what the officer is trying to explain, we can have a conversation and then the complaint is exonerated. Another huge benefit to our body camera policies, or usage rather, is court prep. Officers, when they come back into the station and write their reports, they're allowed to watch their videos to help them write a more detailed, accurate report. Defense attorneys are much quicker to work out a plea deal when they know this footage exists. It is helping create better testimony in court, better report writing, and as far as the transparency part goes, we the state laws in New Hampshire on the body cameras and retention and whatnot, we don't really share a lot of them with the public because there's so many different rules around what we can and can't do and how long we can put stuff out. But what we can do is meet with a family when they're saying, hey, I don't understand what just happened at my house, come and help me, and we can sit down and watch the video with the people involved and explain why the officer did this and said that and whatnot. So that's kind of how we're transparent with the people that we're dealing with. We, on occasion, will put out small clips, asking for the public's help in locating a car that was seen on this officer's camera or this dash cam or whatever. But we have to be careful because of the way our state laws are written. But we do share some stuff like that with the public.
Captain, thank you. Chief, one more question for you before we wrap things up here, because our last question came in and is directed about working with the police chief. This question is, if the chief is not actively engaging with the staff, isn't open to suggestions for change, and constantly demeans openly any suggestions, on that sort of level, that can make it difficult. How can that be fixed, or can it be fixed? Because in this particular instance, somebody is saying that they're losing veteran officers left and right and cannot replace them. So they're having some challenges in working with their chief. What advice would you give?
Well, I would say that, that's one of the things that we would hope that even with the veteran officers and your strategic planning process that we put into place, that there's dialogue for that, right? Everyone needs to have a voice, and your voice needs to be heard. I think it's important for us, especially when for here at the Henderson Police Department, we meet with our labor unions on a monthly basis and one union on a quarterly basis. We have an opportunity to sit down and engage with them and hear their concerns. The challenges about, how do we retain and we keep veteran officers? Many of those things are very tough, even for the chief. Employees in certain states, especially here in Nevada, have lucrative retirement systems. We want to do everything we can to retain the talent in the organization. But many times, it comes down to pay, right? It comes down to those benefits, and whether an employee, we can retain them, and looking at more packages like longevity. Those are things that I think for law enforcement agencies, we have to really work with our labor unions as well as our city officials to do. But when it comes down to just having the relationship, it's got to be with communication, with both sides sitting down, but also having honest dialogue, right? We can hear one side of it, but we also need to also work with the police administration and the chief to understand their point of view as well.
Well, Chief, thank you for that. And we have hit our time, and we just want to thank you all very much for all of the insights and learnings. We want to thank our audience members for asking great questions, participating in the poll questions that we've had. If you have more questions, please email us and we will respond to you. A big thank you to Brian, to Captain Laflamme, and to Chief Andres for their insight and their expertise in providing information to our audience today. And on behalf of the entire team at Utility, thank you very much for joining this webinar, and we hope you'll find time to join us for our next webinar. Thank you.
Hey, thank you once again for this presentation. This presentation will be available on policeone.com within 24 to 48 hours. And we thank you again for your participation, and to Utility for sponsoring today's webinar. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day. This webinar is now concluded.